my worst enemy, the flesh that's covering me, brings me down to my knees.
Welcome to Sermons in the Park, a ministry exploring biblical truth from the Word of God, focusing on the truths that help us in our daily walk with Christ in every aspect of our lives. Now, here is your Reverend, Jamie McCaskill.
Hello, brothers and sisters, and welcome back to an all-new Sermons in the Park. As always, I am your Reverend Jamie McCaskill. I want to take this time, like I do each and every week, just to say thank you for being here. It's always a pleasure to be here. And as you can see, we're back on video this time. So, before we get started, let's do like we do each and every week and bow our heads and thank our Heavenly Father for all the great and wonderful gifts He's given us. He's given us the gift of air, the gift of speech. I'm turning the light back on up here. Sorry, I forgot to. Because it's been so long since I've been on video that I forgot, and I need to turn that light on. So, but he's given us everything from speech to air to breathing. He's given us everything. So let's bow our heads and thank Him. Heavenly Father, we come to You like we do each and every week, just to say thank You. Thank You for the gift of air, the gift of speech, the fact that we woke up this morning with the energy to even be able to move and get out of bed. It's all because of You. If it wasn't for You, Father, we wouldn't be able to do these things, and we thank You. We thank You for Your Son, Jesus, who came and died so long ago so that we can have this relationship we have with You, where we can talk to You about all the things that are going on in our lives, and to be able to, to even stand before You and confess our sins and be forgiven. It's all because of You, Father, and we thank You. We thank You in the name of Your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. So, as you know, we've been doing these audio for a while now because I had to set all this back up. I have my podium here and everything. I had to get all of it set back the way I used to have it. And while it was taken down, other stuff got moved around, so I had to get this all set back up. And we the last one we did on video was before Robby's concert, and of course now I've been laid off, and because I'm laid off, down below you'll find a GoFundMe link to where you can help out, because we're having right now I'm still waiting even on unemployment to even get started for me. So real quick, before we get started, because this week we're in chapter 43, I want to say that just to kind of remind you, last week we read on the audios, right, where Joseph sent his brothers home. He told them to go home to their father and to bring Benjamin back to prove that that they were not spies, because if you remember, he accused them of spies, but it was only because he wants to see Benjamin, right? And they went back to their father Jacob, and Jacob said no. So let's go ahead and read Genesis chapter 43. We're going to read the entire chapter, verses 1 all the way to verse 34. I'm turning so this light over here can shine on me. And the famine was sore in the land, and it came to pass, when they had eaten up the corn which they had brought out of Egypt, their father sent unto them, Go again, buy us a little food. And Judah spake unto him, saying, The man did solemnly protest unto us, saying, Ye shall not see my face, except your brother be with you. If thou wilt send our brother with us, we will go down and buy these food. But if thou wilt not send him, we will not go down. For the man said unto us, Ye shall not see my face, except your brother be with you. And Israel said, Wherefore dealt ye so ill with me, as to tell the man whether ye had yet a brother. And they said, The man asked us straitly of our state and of our kindred, saying, Is your father yet alive? Have ye another brother? And we told him, according to the tenor of these words, could we certainly know that he would say, Bring your brother down. And Judah said unto Israel his father, Send the lad with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and thou, and also our little ones. I will be surety for him. Of my hand shalt thou require him. If I bring him not unto thee, and set him before thee, then let me bear the blame forever. For except we had lingered, surely now we had returned this second time. And their father Israel said unto them, If it must be so now, do this. Take of the best fruits in the land in your vessels. Carry down the man a present, a little balm and a little honey, spices and myrrh, nuts and almonds, and take double money in thy hand. Oh, it says in your hand, sorry. And the money that was brought again to the mouth of your sacks, carry it again in your hand. Peradventure it was an oversight. Take also your brother and arise, go again unto the man, and God Almighty give you mercy before the man, that he may send away your other brother and Benjamin. If I be bereaved of my children, I am bereaved. And the man took that present. And the men. I'm having trouble seeing. Let me grab this flashlight. I need to get a light over here. And the men took the present, and they took double money in their hand, and Benjamin, and rose up and went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. And when Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the ruler of his house, Bring these men home, and slay, and make ready, for these men shall dine with me at noon. And the man did as Joseph bade, and the man brought the men into Joseph's house. And the men were afraid, because they were brought into Joseph's house. And they said, Because of the money that was returned in our sacks, at the first time are we brought in, that he may seek occasion against us, and fall upon us, and take us for bondsmen and our asses. And they came near to the steward of Joseph's house, and they communed with him at the door of the house, and said, O sir, we came indeed down at the first time to buy food. And it came to pass, when we came to the inn, that we opened our sacks, and behold, every man's money was in the mouth of his sack. Our money is full weight, and we have brought it again in our hand. And other money have we brought down in our hands to buy food. We cannot tell who put our money in our sacks. And he said, Peace be to you, fear not. Your God and the God of your father hath given you treasure in your sacks. I had your money. And he brought Simeon out unto them. And the man brought the men into Joseph's house, and gave them water, and they washed their feet. And he gave their asses provender. And they made ready to present against Joseph, came at noon. For they heard that they should eat bread there. And when Joseph came home, they brought him the present which was in their hand into the house, and bowed themselves to him to the earth. And he asked them of their welfare, and said, Is your father well? The old man of whom ye spake, is he yet alive? And they answered, Thy servant our father is in good health. He is yet alive. And they bowed down their heads, and made obeisance. And he lifted up his eyes, and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, Is this your younger brother, of whom ye spake unto me? And he said, God be gracious unto thee, my son. And Joseph made haste, for his bowels did yearn upon his brother. And he sought where to weep, and he entered into his chamber, and wept there. And he washed his face, and went out, and refrained himself, and said, Set on bread. And they set on for him by himself, and for them by themselves. And for the Egyptians which did eat with him by themselves, because the Egyptians might not eat bread with the Hebrews. For this is an abomination unto the Egyptians. And they set before him the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. And the men marveled one to another. And he took and sent messes upon them from before him. But Benjamin's mess was 5 times so much as any of theirs. And they drank and were merry with him. Right? So like we do each week, we read the entire chapter. Then we go back, we find that first chapter we read, we reread that, and then we begin to pick it apart. So let's go back to chapter 43, verse 1. It says, "And the famine was sore in the land." Well, that was pretty self-explanatory, right? We see, and the famine was sore in the land, meaning in the land of Canaan, right? It increased. It became worse and worse and worse over time. And this right here is observed purely for the sake of what we then see next. It shows the reason and the necessity of Jacob's sons to make this second journey that we're about to read about. So verse 2. "And it came to pass, when they had eaten up the corn which they had brought out of Egypt, their father said unto them, Go again, buy a little food." So we start off this verse with this. It says, "And it came to pass, when they had eaten up the corn which they had brought out of Egypt." Now, you need to think about this, because Jacob's family was quite large, right? He had he had all those sons, and then their sons had children. And all of those servants he had as well, because we know he had a lot of servants. And we need to remember this too, that 9 men and their asses brought back this provender. They, or all this corn, and that probably did not last for very long. Even with them eating it very sparingly, because of, with a famine, you want to eat a little bit at a time. You don't want to eat all the food at once. So they would have done their best to make it last as long as they could. And it's very possible as well that only Jacob and his children and grandchildren eat. We don't need to think about that, because Calvin said that the servants ate even less food than they did. They would have eaten the lesser foods. They would have eaten things like, that could be found in the land, like acorns and herbs and roots and stuff like that. And then when the larger parts of the corn were gone, with very little left, what do you think Jacob and his daughter-in-laws and their grandchildren would have eaten? Until the sons came back. They would, of course, eaten the same stuff. Because Egypt is pretty far to go for these fresh provisions. There's also the possibility, that there was some corn in Canaan at that time. But it probably would have been just very little of it. And you could be certain there was some fruit and other foods there that they could find, especially when you go look at verse 11. Anyway, we then see this. It says, "Their father said, Go again, buy us a little food." Jacob's only talking about the immediate family here. He's hoping that this famine is going to end soon, because he didn't hear Joseph's what Joseph said. So he doesn't know how long this is going to last. So He's telling his sons to go back to Egypt, buy some provisions, and again, we get a picture here that the sons did not move to do it on their own. They didn't get up and go unless their father told them to, and I think they were determined not to, right? Again, don't forget, Jacob said he will not send Benjamin. So the brothers are waiting for their father to make the first move. And he didn't move until he saw that, hey, I have to do this. It's necessary to send Benjamin. Verse 3, what do we see? "And Judah spake unto him, saying, The man did solemnly protest unto us, saying, Ye shall not see my face, except your brother be with you." Right? So right there at the beginning, it says, "And Judah spake unto him." This time it's not Reuben, right? Reuben's the oldest. And Reuben already tried, and he failed. Simeon's the next in line, and, well, Simeon's in Egypt. Levi, well, he didn't fare very well in his father's eyes after what happened at Shechem. Okay, so Judah's the next one. So he probably got his brother's blessing before he went and spoke to his father about this, and his father had interest in him, and Judah also has authority with his brothers too. We know that he's a very prudent man, and he probably could speak very well. The verse says this: it says, saying, the man did solemnly protest unto him. That man, of course, is Joseph. Even though they didn't know it was Joseph. And notice they call him the man. Now this is not out of contempt. Okay? They're not speaking in a rude way about him either. But they know that he is a great man. An honorable man. I mean, he's the governor of Egypt. And what Joseph said to them is what's keeping them from going back down there. Unless what he asked for happens. Okay? Backing up for a second, I feel like I have to point this out. What I found in the Septuagint was that it adds this. It adds the man, the Lord of the land. And that, of course, is Joseph. In the strongest terms. And also in the most solemn manner. He protested by the life of Pharaoh. Do you remember that? The verse then says this, saying, ye shall not see my face. They would not be able to even go near Joseph. They would not be able to buy corn from him. And he said this, except your brother be with you, right? Meaning, of course, Benjamin, Joseph's younger brother. That famine is very widespread, and it's lasting a very long time. It was better for them all to go to Egypt, than to starve there and die. The entire family is at risk here of starving. Now Judah, he remembers what Joseph said. What Joseph warned, okay? That he will not listen to anything they have to say until he lays his eyes on Benjamin. He also is still holding Simeon there too, right? Now let's look at verse 4. If thou wilt send our brother with us, we will go down and buy thee food. If thou wilt send our brother with us. In other words, what he's saying is, tell Benjamin to go with us. Put Benjamin in our care. He says, we will go down and buy thee food. Judah is giving his father a condition here. They're ready to go. They're willing to go. Right? But they need Benjamin with them, or they're not going to go. Verse 5. But if thou wilt not send him, we will not go down. For the man said unto us, ye shall not see my face, except your brother be with us. Right there it says, but if thou wilt not send him, we will not go. They're not saying this in an undutiful way, if you will. He's not being rebellious. He's not being disobedient. He's not being stubborn. He's not being obstinate. All right? He's saying that they will go. If he sends Benjamin, they will not go. If they did, guys, it's not going to be safe for them. If they did, they would be arrested as spies. And as we discussed, that means that they would then be put to death, right? And if they were told they would be, right? But besides, it's going to be in vain if they go, because they're not going to be able to get anything. The verse then says this. It says, for the man said unto us, you shall not see my face, except your brother be with you. They're repeating this. And why? Why are they repeating it? 2 reasons. One, it confirms what they already said. And also, it's an apology. It's an apology from them. They want to clear things up, right? They don't want to be charged with being spies, because that shows unfaithfulness, right? Verse 6. And Israel said, wherefore dealt ye so ill with me as to tell the man whether ye had yet another brother. Notice it starts off with Israel here. It says, and Israel said. So he's answering his son Jacob. He says this. He says, wherefore dealt ye so ill with me? He's asking why they brought this evil on. Okay? Why they're giving him so much grief and trouble. You know, they threw him into such a perplexing and distressing situation. He didn't know what to do. He's confused. And then we see this, as to tell the man whether he had yet a brother. You see, he felt that when they told Joseph about Benjamin, they were being foolish. That there had been no reason for them to have told him. And that if they had not done that, if they had just not said anything, it would have prevented all this weight from being on his mind. And the mischief that he thought would happen to Benjamin because of this. He did not want to allow Benjamin to go. Plain and simple. Like I said, this is the last child by Rachel, his beloved wife. He was angry with them for even talking about him. And then what we read in verse 7. And they said, the man asked us straitly of our state and of our kindred, saying, if your father yet alive, have ye another brother? And we told him, according to the tenor of these words, could we certainly know that he would say, bring your brother down. Judah's telling his father here that Joseph, he doesn't say Joseph, but this man asked about their brother. He says it right there. He says, is your father yet alive? Have ye a brother? Now these questions right here, we didn't read these questions being asked, right? Because if it was just being brief, as if it was just being brief, right? Now, we see that we see them being pointed out here because we see how, I think how to word this properly. They weren't said before because it would have just been said so briefly, right? But we are seeing it mentioned here. And the reason it's being mentioned here is to point out just how much Joseph wanted to see his family. How much Joseph wanted to hear about his family. Joseph had been away from them so long. He just wanted to know, hey, are they okay? Right? We mentioned that before. And it also explains to us that how Joseph found out about them. Right? How Joseph came to learn about them. Verse 8. And Judah said unto Israel his father, send the lad with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and thou, and also our little ones. Right here we see Judah. He's using every argument at his disposal, right? That way he could, everything that he could think about that would make his dad agree to let Benjamin go with them. He closes with a very, very powerful statement here. He says this, if I bring him not unto thee, and set him before thee, then let me have sinned against thee all my days. That means he would take all of the blame and all of the penalty, because he would have been the one that sinned against his father. The verse then says this, doesn't it? It says, and Judah said unto Israel, his father, send the lad with me, and we will rise and go. They'll go straight to Egypt right then. They will go down there and they will get corn. Now notice that he calls Benjamin a lad, because Benjamin is the youngest, right? He was the one who was closest at hand to his father. He would have babied him. Okay, he would have treated him like a child, even when he wasn't one. Now, by this time, Benjamin is 32 years old. We know that he was 7 years younger than Joseph, right? And he was 39. Joseph was. So that would make Benjamin 32. Benjamin must have had his own children by this time who would have went with him and his father down to Egypt. Now let's take a look at something real quick. We're going to look at Genesis chapter 46, verse 21. And unto Joseph, the land of Egypt, were born Manasseh and Ephraim, which Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, priest of On, bare unto him. If you want to calculate the age, I want you to go look at chapter 30, verse 22. And God remembered Rachel, and God hearkened unto her and opened her womb. All right. The verse that says this: that we may live and not die, both we and thou and our little ones. We see Judah here that saying that if they went to Egypt with Benjamin to go get corn, they would all survive, and that of course includes Benjamin. But if not, then all of them would die. And yes, that would include Benjamin, right? Who Jacob cared so much for. So it would be more wise for everyone's safety if he just let Benjamin go with them. Let Benjamin go with them down there to get the corn, or Benjamin would die when they all did. Okay? Sure, if he went, he could die. True, that's true. But Judah was certain that he wouldn't. We could tell by what he says next in verse 9. If we be surety with him, of my hand shalt thou require him. If I bring him not unto thee and set him before thee, then let me bear the blame forever. I will be surety for him. We saw that Reuben, when he guaranteed Benjamin's safety, he was rejected, right? That was back in chapter 42, verses 37, 38. We're not going to go back there. But right here, we're seeing Judah guarantee the same thing, and that's being accepted. Why? Why would that be? Well, because of the stress of the famine. You got to remember, Reuben asked before the famine got worse. Judah's asking after the famine got worse. As well as how everyone could die if they just sat there and waited. Right? Verse 10. For except we had lingered, surely now we had returned this second time. We open up with these words right here. I love it. For except we had lingered. You see, Jacob was the one who hesitated. He hesitated to allow Benjamin to go down there. Right? And that caused a delay in the journey. And then the verse says this: surely now we had returned this second time. This delay in allowing Benjamin to go caused them to lose time. And it created this, it's what created this distress on them and their families. Right? Judah believed that they should have already done this. They should have already gone down and come back with more corn. And with Benjamin. As part of God's plan, right? Israel was meant to stay in Egypt for 400 years. Remember that? Jacob was unwilling to leave Canaan unless a significant event occurred, like this famine that they're going through right now. Asking Benjamin to go to Egypt, yes, that was difficult for Jacob to accept. I understand that. Even with all the promises from his sons, he knew that the pain would consume him if they had not come back with Benjamin. It's puzzling when you think about it, but there was little concern for Simeon at all. Remember, Simeon is being kept in Egypt in prison, but yet his father is just sitting here going, Benjamin's going nowhere. All it would take was Benjamin to go down there and be seen by Joseph, right? And all of this could have been settled. But no, very little concern is shown for him. Verse 11. And their father Israel said unto them, if it must be so now, do this. Take of the best fruits in the land in your vessels, carry down the man a present, a little balm, a little honey, spices and myrrh, nuts and almonds. And look at what the verse starts off with. And their father said unto them. So after he's considered what he's considered the arguments that they made, he partially accepts them. He then realizes there was no other option but to agree and let Benjamin go. Then we read this. If it must be so now, do this. Meaning if it's necessary for Benjamin to go, despite how reluctant he's being, he tells them to do it this way. He says, take of the best fruits of the land in your vessels. He tells them to take all of the best produce that Canaan has to offer, which was highly praised, right? He says, put them in sacks that they can use to bring basically put them in these sacks and use these sacks to bring the corn bag. And then he says, and carry down the man a present. He's saying to take it to this powerful ruler, Joseph, who they don't realize is Joseph. And this was intended to be a way of securing friendship with him, and to get him, to convince him to let Simeon come back, and to let Benjamin come back. The present would include these following items, which we saw listed in the verse. Now, let me call your attention to this one part that you might not have even considered until right now. A little. This is a very kingly gift. Remember? That they most likely had very little themselves already. Think about this. If they did not get any grain left, if they didn't have any grain left, they had no future to look forward to. So they're giving him what little they have. Verse 12. And take double money in your hand, and the money that was brought again in his mouth of your sack. Carry it again in your hand. Peradventure, it was an oversight. Take double money in your hand. He's telling them to take twice as much as they took the last time. Right? This could have been, maybe to get twice as much as they got before. Or it could be what Jarkey says. Because the corn was getting so scarce that it would make it more expensive. Right? Now keep this in mind too. This double money would be on top of the money they took that was brought back. Because they're taking that money down there to pay, to give it back. Say, hey, we found this money. This could have been an accident. We want to make sure you get it back. Oh, and we've got twice as much money as we brought last time. That makes this 3 portions. The verse goes on to say this. And the money that was brought again in the mouth of your sack, carry it again in your hand to give it back. Basically he's wanting to make sure they give it back. Okay? That way they're not charged with non-payment for the corn they brought last time. Basically, so that they don't think that they stole it. That's why he says right here, peradventure it was an oversight. He didn't know what happened, right? Who could have guessed what was the reason that happened? It could have been a mistake, right? It could have been the governor's mistake, it could have been anyone's mistake. He was unsure, like he's like any of us would be. He didn't know how it happened, but he knew it had to have been an error. Verse 13. Take also your brother and arise, go again unto the man. Take also your brother. Jacob showed his agreement, showing that he's willing for Benjamin to go. He's entrusting him in their hands, if you will. Then the verse says, and arise, go again to the man. Of course, that's Joseph, right? Who they still did not know it was Joseph. I know I got to keep repeating that, but I'm going to keep repeating it because I want to make sure that we point out that is Joseph that they are buying corn from. Verse 14. And God Almighty give you the mercy before the man, that he may send away your other brother and Benjamin If I be bereaved of my children, I am bereaved. So in this verse right here, well, in the last verse, right, we saw him allow Benjamin to go with them. And in this verse, we see him pray for the brothers and Benjamin to have a safe trip, right? And we see him cry about how he's a victim of circumstances. This shows us that he has gone into pessimism here, which has deepened after he lost Joseph. Right here, we're seeing him give this situation over to God. He realizes that if he didn't send the Benjamin down, he would get no food. And if he did not send them down, all of them would die. Right? He's telling his sons now how they should handle this situation so that they would not incite anger in this man who's in charge of Egypt. But I want to call your memory back just a little bit here, because we saw Canaan did indeed sell, or we see right here that Canaan did still have fruit. Okay? They had some fruit, they had some nuts, and they just didn't have any grain. They didn't have any corn. The Bible tells us that bread is the staff of life. And since bread is the staff of life, and they need grain. What we're seeing is Jacob saying, whatever comes, I will accept it being from God. Verse 15. And the men, took that present, and they took double money in their hands, and Benjamin, and rose up and went down to Egypt and stood before Pharaoh. And the men took the present, meaning the present that their father told them to take with them. And then it says this, and they took double money in their hands. That means the money that was not found in the sacks, okay? Because they're already carrying that as well. We need to make sure we understand that. They're taking twice as much money, and they're taking the money that that was returned to them. And then the verse says, and Benjamin, they took him, because Jacob had given them permission. The verse says, and rose up and went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. So they showed themselves to Joseph. They presented themselves, if you will, and they asked for more corn. And of course, they answered all the questions that he would have had for them. And then verse 16 says, and when Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the ruler of his house, bring these men home and slay, and make ready, for these men shall dine with me at noon. And when Joseph saw Benjamin with them, that's what we start off with. He saw Benjamin when when he saw Benjamin with them, even though he hadn't seen him for over 22 years, he recognized him. Because I want you to remember, Benjamin was only 10 years old when Joseph was carried away to Egypt. Even though Benjamin had surely changed, he'd grown up. He didn't look like a 10-year-old kid anymore, right? But when he saw him with the other brothers, he recognized him. He figured that it had to be Benjamin. Then we read this. He said to the ruler of the house, this of course would be his steward, the one that he calls to handle all of his needs. And he tells him this. He says, bring these men home. He went back to his own house because Joseph was now, he either was in the same city or he was close to it, where the granaries were, right? And he was overseeing the distribution of the granary at that time. So he tells his steward, hey, take these men back to my home. He says, and slay and make ready. To slay a slaughter. That means he wanted him to kill an animal for food. This would have been probably a sheep or a lamb or a calf or something. They would have likely ordered one of these animals to be prepared for eating by either boiling it or roasting it. Or maybe both methods. I don't know. He wanted to make sure that it was suitable for his brothers to eat. And then the verse says, for these men shall dine with me at noon. Now, something to keep in mind here is that the usual time for people to eat in the eastern part of the world is similar to, during that time period, I should say, is similar to what we do today, during the daytime. However, the Romans, they had a different schedule. They preferred to eat their meals in the evening time. The brothers did as Joseph requested, though. They brought present, or I should say, the brothers did as Jacob ordered, right? They brought presents with them. And they also brought money, and they brought Benjamin. Joseph was thrilled to see his younger brother. He was excited. Hey man, it's Benjamin. This is my younger brother. The same. We got both mother and father in common. And he tells his servants here. He says, basically, he tells them, hey, go prepare lunch. Now it's worth noting that Egyptians and Hebrews, they did not eat together. We're going to talk about that here in a minute. So let's look at verse 17. And the man did as Joseph bade, and the man brought the men into Joseph's home. It says, and the man did as Joseph bade, and the man brought the men into Joseph's home. Right? So his servant took the brothers to his home. He led them into, most likely, a specific room that was used for this. He arranged for everything that Joseph said. This man was a diligent servant. He was a great servant. He made sure that everything was ready for dinner. Now, in old Cairo, a tourist, or if you go there on a tour, you're taken to see the house of Joseph. It's located in the tower. There's also a remarkable well there that's believed to have been built by Joseph. According to local tradition, this is where the granaries were. It's where the corn was stored. Okay? Now, let's look at verse 18. And the men were afraid because they were brought into Joseph's house. And they said, because of the money that was returned in our sacks at the first time as we brought in, that he may seek occasion against us and fall upon us and take us for bondsmen and our asses. And so the brothers, they were afraid. It says, because they were brought into Joseph's house. Jarkey points out that it was not customary for people who came to buy corn to stay in Joseph's house. Instead, they would have been sent into lodging in an inn somewhere in the city. Okay? And then we read, and they said, because of the money that was returned in our sacks at the first time are we brought in. So they believe that Joseph is wanting to question them about that money. Why they left without paying. And then you see, they still did not understand why they found that money returned to them. This act made them feel like they looked dishonest, like they looked deceitful, possibly even a thief, right? The verse then says this, that he may seek occasion against us, or roll on us, right? To place the blame on them, to shame on them, shifting the responsibility and leaving the disgrace and the scandal associated with what they did. The verse then says this, and fall upon us, meaning with harsh words, stern threats, things like that. Maybe even physical aggression, violence, right? The verse says, and take us for bondsmen and our asses. They think that maybe he's intending, his intention was to imprison them or punish them for fraud, for theft, like I said. That's the customary penalty for that kind of offense. Additionally, maybe he planned to seize their donkeys, right? Take it because of what they did. Now, when they were brought in his house, they feared the worst, right? They believed that Joseph would imprison them, make them slaves, because they thought they were caught, that he was going to say that he caught them stealing, right? It seems that their approach was to just expect the worst, right? And that leads to that leads them to be anxious and fearful. Verse 19. And they came near to the steward of Joseph's house, and they communed with him at the door of the house. And they came near to the steward of Joseph's house. We know that they must have said that they have it. They have that they have something with them that they want to give to him. And we read this, and they communed with him at the door of the house. They spoke with him before they even went inside. They're uneasy, right? They're eager to know, hey, why are we being brought here? Because this is something that's unusual, right? And then verse 20 says, and said, "O sir, we came indeed down the first time to buy food." "O sir." Now this is being said most likely by Judah, just like we saw him say, "Blame me," right? If they were being rude. The Vulgate says this, "We pray, sir, that thou wouldst hear us." Jarkey and Aben Ezra, they say that this was said they were beseeching, they were entreating, they were supplicating to him. And then the verse says, "We came indeed down at the first time to buy food." These guys, they're making sure, hey, we are not spies, right? We came down here to buy corn. We came down here to buy grain. They're not there for fraud in any way. They're not trying to trick anyone. They want to pay for what they asked for. They want to pay for what they are buying. And then verse 21. "And it came to pass, when we came to the inn, that we opened our sacks, and behold, every man's money was in the mouth of his sack, our money in full weight, and we have brought it again in our hand." So it starts off with, "And it came to pass when we came to the inn." After they left, they stopped somewhere to rest on that very first day. They said this, that we opened our sack. So they opened up that feed, the sacks that had the feed in it, remember? For the animals. Notice the "we" here. This shows us that it was all of them, not just one. Last week when we read it, it's read like it was only one of them. Take a look back. Chapter 42, verse 27. "And as one of them opened his sack to give his ass provender in the inn, he espied his money, for behold, it was in his sack's mouth." And then the verse says this, "And behold, every man's money was in the mouth of his sack, our money in full weight." Meaning all of it. All the money they brought with them. If you've been following me long enough, you've heard me say this before. But back then, all of the money was paid in weight, not in pieces. Okay? Not a $100 bill, not a $1 bill, not a 1-cent coin, not a 50-cent coin. No. It was paid by weight. And then the verse goes on to say this, "And we have brought it again in our hand." They're planning to give it back. That way that no one would think they defrauded them. Okay? They were trying to make sure that the steward knew right away what happened. Okay? They're hoping that the steward would go tell Joseph that, hey, they still had no idea what happened. Right? They keep explaining what happened in the next verse, verse 22. "And our other money have we brought down in our hand to buy food. We cannot tell who put our money in our sack." It says, "And other money have we brought down in our hand to buy food." Like I said, this is the money their father told them to bring. Twice as much money to get what? Twice as much food. Either that or, as we discussed earlier, maybe the price had doubled. Whatever. Them bringing this shows yet again they're being honest, they're being upright. They said this, "We cannot tell who put our money in our sacks." They're ignorant of it. They don't know who did it. Right? They should not be blamed for it. They hoped that they would not be blamed for it. Verse 23. "And he said, Peace be with you. Fear not. Your God and the God of our father hath given you treasure in your sacks. I hid your money, and he brought Simeon out unto them. I love this verse right here. I want you to notice what that steward said. It says, your God hath given. Now, this could be one of two things. Either A, the steward had come to the true faith, right? Or B, he was just familiar with how Joseph spoke about God and life. These brothers are so worried about making sure that they're proven innocent, right? That they miss this. They miss the steward here referencing the one true God of Israel. The God of your father, they say. God's oversight of the events that he had played a part in. I hid your money, right? Is that what he says right there? Verse 23. I had your money. Sorry. This is the first reassurance that we see them get. Everything was all right. The steward calls God your God and also the God of your father. Egyptians did not recognize God. The next even better reassurance is that Simeon was okay because he had not been hurt. We know that they're wondering, hey, what's going on here, right? Verse 24. And the man brought the men into Joseph's house and gave them water, and they washed their feet, and he gave their asses provender. And the man brought the men into Joseph's house. Now, after what we just read, after he set their minds at ease, both with what happened with the money and also with bringing Simeon out so they can see that he's not bound. The verse then says, and gave them water, and they washed their feet. You've heard me talk about this time and time again. All right. In the Middle East, in that culture, this was done after a long travel, right? As well as when you're having a meal. It was done for both, refreshment as well as cleanliness. The verse then says, and he gave their asses provender, right? This makes sure that they're fully entertained in a very hospitable way. Them and everything they brought with them, okay? They're being treated as an honored guest. Even their animals are receiving some special treatment here. Verse 25. And they made ready the present against Joseph came at night, for they heard that they should eat bread there. And they made ready the present against Joseph came at noon. They took the presents out of the bag, and whatever it was, and after they took they took the presents out of the bag or whatever it was, okay? And they took it after the bags were taken off of their asses, and they brought it in properly so that it would be there for Joseph to see when he came home at noon. And then the verse says, for they heard that they should eat bread there. Now, bread would have been a part of every meal. They must have been told that, hey, he would be there to eat with them. That's what I'm gathering from this. The steward probably told them that, or someone else, someone in his home, right? Or maybe they even overheard it. I don't know. But verse 26. And when Joseph came home, they brought him the present which was in their hand into the house, and bowed themselves to him to the earth. And when Joseph came home, so that would have been at noon, right? Joseph, he came home, he's ready to eat. And reading this brings back some memories to me. When I was growing up, my father, my grandfather, and all my uncles on my mom's side, they would go to work at a fish market. And we would all just sit around together and eat at noon. Because in Jonesville, there's a whistle that blows at noon every day. It's like we call it the fire whistle. Up here they call it a storm whistle, but that blows at noon every day. So at noon, we knew Grandpa, Dad, and all my uncles, they're going to come home at noon. We're all going to sit around, and we're going to eat together. So I can picture this. I can picture what we're seeing in this verse here. It says, they brought him the present which was in their hands in the house. So all the brothers, they got together and they presented the gifts to Joseph together. This would have been in his parlor, most likely. And the gift from their father, or them, or both, the verse then says this, and bowed themselves to him to the earth. So they prostrated themselves in a humble way. Again, we're seeing a fulfillment of that vision that Joseph had when he was younger. And this time it's more complete. Because now it's not just, it's every brother. Benjamin's there too. All 11 of them. Just like those 11 stars. And then the verse says, bowed themselves to him to the earth. Just like in that dream that he had, right? Now it's reality. The brothers are here. They're humbly bowing down to him, presenting him with a gift in hopes that he will go easy on them. The nuts, the fruit, they're all from what? They're from Joseph's native land. So these things mean more to him. They're not native to Egypt. This is something he probably enjoyed when he was younger, and he hasn't had since he's been in Egypt. I bet you that this brought back so many memories to Joseph. Verse 27. And he asked them of their welfare, and said, is your father well, the old man of whom ye spake? Is he yet alive? So it says right there, and he asked them of their welfare. You could say their peace, right? Their prosperity. He would have asked them about their health. Where are you guys well? Is everybody feeling okay? Is there good health on you? Was the journey long, right? And the verse says this, and said, is your father well, the old man of whom ye spake? Because they spoke to him about their father last time. They told him that, they were sons of an old man, and that, he dwelt in Canaan. He asked them, is he yet alive? I think he wanted to know this more than anything, because it's been so long since he saw him. I bet he was afraid that his father had died, because, they hadn't been back in a long time. Verse 28. And they said, thy servant our father is in good health, he is yet alive. And they bowed down their heads and made obeisance. So the brothers, they answered him. We see it right there. And they answered, thy servant our father is in good health, he is yet alive. This answers both questions. Right? Also notice that they say that Israel, Jacob, is Joseph's servant. They're doing obeisance, right? Not just for themselves, but also for their father. And also that, hey, he sent this present as well. Now, I see no reason to object to this. I think that it's very probable that he did tell them to give a salutation for it, that he is their servant. This would also make that part of Joseph's dream fulfilled as well. The part about, the son giving obeisance to him, like we saw back in chapter 37, verse 9. The verse then says, and they bow their heads and made obeisance. This being the second time here. I think that they did it every time they answered a question. That's just me. That's what I think. And again, this is being done to show that his dream is being fully complete. When we read all of this, we can feel how Joseph was aching. He wanted to know how his dad's doing. Don't forget how long it's been since he spoke to his dad. He loved him so much. He is his father's favorite son. Verse 29. And he lifted up his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, is this your youngest brother, of whom ye spake unto me? And he said, God be gracious unto thee, my son. And it says, and he lifted up his eyes, and he saw his brother Benjamin. Remember, this isn't the first time he saw him, okay? Because he would have seen him when they presented themselves to him. But at that time, I don't think he paid any special attention, okay? He just gave him kind of the side eye, if you will. But this time, he's looking directly at him with intent. It calls Benjamin his mother's son. Benjamin was Joseph's brother through Rachel and through Jacob. He's the only brother that's like that for him. And then we read this, and said, Is this your younger brother of whom ye spake unto me? He knew who he was. He just wanted to hear them say it, to lead into what he had to say. We read this, and he said. This is just him continuing after what after they answered him. God be gracious unto thee, my son. He's speaking as a superior here, right? A governor, because he would be a father to his inferiors. I hope you understand what I mean by that. Also, as a man, a relative, a brother, even though they have not found out yet, he's speaking in a tender way, an affectionate way. Also in a religious way, because he's a religiously good man. What he says here is the best thing that he could wish on his brother. The grace and the goodness of God. Because you see, you could understand this in the largest and most expressive way, that it would include all good things, the temporal and the spiritual, and the eternal. This is just another moment where we see Joseph use the name of God while conversing with them. And again, we see the brothers, they don't notice because they see an Egyptian, right? Look back at chapter 42, verse 18. And Joseph said unto them the third day, This do and live, for I fear God. This is a moment that when my wife was watching the cartoon with me, that I told you about a while back, that they captured this moment perfectly because this is a heart-wrenching moment for Joseph. Here he is, seeing his brother Benjamin, all grown up, and he speaks a blessing on him. And then look at the next verse. Look at that next verse. Look at verse 30. And Joseph made haste, for his bowels did yearn upon his brother, and he sought where to weep. And he entered into his chamber and wept there. I'm telling you, that cartoon that we watched, it grabbed a hold of this scene. I'm telling you. It says, and Joseph made haste. He was getting out of that room as fast as he could. He ran out of there. And the verse says, for his bowels did yearn upon his brother, meaning his passions were growing. He was so happy to see Benjamin. The love that was inside of him just wanted to burst out. Even though he spoke to him so little, he was about to burst. So to prevent that from happening, to prevent them from finding out who he was, he left the room. The verse says, and he sought where to weep. Like I said, when he saw Benjamin, it just made him overcome with emotions. He did not want them to see him cry. So he left the room. He went into his bedroom. And what did he do? He wept. Do you see? The verse says it. It says, and he entered into his chamber and he wept there. This was a place where he knew that he could be alone, where he knew he would not be heard. He's so moved to tears. We see him move to tears several times in the Bible, actually. In chapter 42, verse 24. In chapter 45, verse 2. And also verses 14 and 15. Chapter 46, verse 29. We see Joseph weep. Verse 31. And he washed his face and went out and refrained himself and said, set on bread. And he washed his face. He washed his face. Why? Because he wanted to remove the tears. That way no one would have seen that he had cried. Right? And he went out, the verse says. He left his bedroom. He went back to where his brothers were. And the verse says, and refrained himself. He did what he could to keep himself from crying, from showing any passion, showing any love, showing any joy, whatever. And then the verse says, and said, set on bread. This means he told the servants to bring bread out. It was time to eat. It was time to set the table. Like I told you before, bread was served at every meal. Verse 32. And they set on for him by himself, and for them by themselves, and for the Egyptians which did eat with him by themselves, because the Egyptians might not eat bread with the Hebrews, for this is an abomination unto the Egyptians. Not eat bread with the Hebrews. What does this tell us? This tells us that Joseph had a table all by himself because the Egyptians, they would not share a table with foreigners, right? And then we'll take a look at chapter 46, verse 34. That ye shall say, thy servant's trade hath been about cattle from our youth even until now, but we, and also our father, that ye may dwell in the land of Goshen, for every shepherd is an abomination unto the Egyptians. Now, reading this tells us something, though. The Pharaoh that Joseph served was not a Hyksos king. Now, a Hyksos king would not have demanded this kind of discrimination. And here we read that it was an abomination unto the Egyptians, meaning that the Pharaoh was a native Egyptian. Do you get that? And apparently the Egyptians had a hatred for Asiatic shepherds. Like we just read in 46:34, and also in, see if I can flip there. If not, I'll pull out my digital Bible. Exodus chapter 8, verse 26. And Moses said, it is not meet so to do, for we shall sacrifice the abomination of the Egyptians to the Lord our God. Lo, shall we sacrifice the abomination of the Egyptians before their eyes, and will they not stone us? Okay? These tables are separated because, like I said, the Egyptians and the Hebrews, they would never share a table. And again, he still has not told his brothers who he is. Verse 33. And they sat before him, the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. And the men marveled one to another. Look at how he has them seated. The firstborn, the youngest. These brothers must be oblivious. Or they have to be like sitting there thinking, right? Because here they are, they're seated at a table in Egypt by their birth order. The oldest to the youngest. He set them in their order of birth. They had to be wondering, how does he know? Right? I mean, come on. All the questions that he's asking about their family, and he uses the name of God. I mean, sure, they think Joseph's dead, right? We saw that back in chapter 4. And we see, let's take a look at something real quick. I'm going to change my mind on what verse to look at. Genesis chapter 44, verse 20. And we said unto my Lord, we have a father, an old man, and a child of his old age, a little one, and his brother is dead, and he alone is left of his mother, and his father loveth him. Now, if Joseph was alive, surely he would not be this person, right? That's what they're thinking. And like I said, they probably laughed at they had laughed at probably all of his dreams of being superior. And the verse says this, and they sat before him, the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. And the men marveled one to another. How could they not? How could they not just leap at what's going on here? He showed concern for Jacob. He showed affection for the youngest brother, Benjamin. He had this knowledge of the order of their birth, and nothing, right? So let's look at the last verse here, the last verse of the day, verse 34. It says, and he took and sent messes unto them from before him. And Benjamin's mess was 5 times so much as any of theirs, and they drank and were merry with him, right? I like this part right here where it says Benjamin's mess. The favoritism of the son of Rachel here was a good test of the brothers' attitude. They all had this history of envy that they had shown. How they disliked Joseph. And that type of animosity is not something that can be easily, hidden, right? And here we see none of it. What this does is this shows us that the brothers are not jealous of Benjamin. They're not resentful of Benjamin. He sees that they must have changed their hearts. But we will see next week that Joseph was going to test them, okay? These brothers, they're so blind to the truth. And these signs that Joseph has shown them on who he was, the name of God, the seating order, giving Benjamin 5 times as much as he gave the rest of them. None of it works. So we're done here today. I'm glad to be back on camera for you guys. The doing the audio ones, it's easier for me because I don't have to, set up the backdrop and put everything on. But I do miss the videos. So I want to thank you all for joining me here. Again, guys, down below you'll see the GoFundMe to help during my during this layoff period that I'm under, because this is really hurting. I don't like not working. That's why you guys are getting so many episodes over on the podcast. So if you're not following the podcast, you're missing out a lot. I just did another episode on the Mormons, another episode on the Jehovah's Witnesses, and then I did it was kind of I thought it would be longer. I did an episode that was a culmination of all those. Basically, all that research that I've been doing in these different ones, I put them all into one. I while I was doing that, I was also keeping a record of what everything I was looking up. So I did like an episode just on cults. So that's stuff if you don't follow the podcast, you missed out on. Go check out the podcast. I really recommend it. You get a lot more over there. And it's not because it's just that I want the podcast to be different. And I'm about to, I don't know when, but I'm going to be interviewing that pro wrestler pretty soon too. And that will be over on the podcast. I might put it over here on YouTube. I don't know yet, but I'm more planning that for the podcast. So just bear that in mind. There's no guarantees it's going to be here. If you want to hear that, you're going to have to follow the podcast. So I want to thank you all for joining me here. I pray the Lord continues to bless and keep each and every one of you, and I'll see you all soon. I love you, and God bless you.
You have been listening to Sermons in the Park with Reverend Jamie McCaskill. Be sure to follow us on YouTube, BitChute, and Rumble. And as always, thank you for listening.
There's joy for the morning, sinner be still. Earth has no sorrow, heaven can't heal. Earth has no sorrow, heaven can't heal. So lay down